Hello crazy fam, welcome to apartment hunting season, and that is why I'm coming to you with another video because I know as it gets closer to summertime, more people are looking to move and more people are doing this for the first time. And applying for apartment leases is not always the easiest thing if you've never done it before, so I figured as a past leasing agent and a current person that continues to live at new places and has experience applying for said leases and not per se traditional ways. Because I promise you that if you ever get a no or you think you're gonna get a no from an apartment complex, they're just gonna be like, nah, we're not gonna approve you. I know some tricky ways around that no. Now before we get into everything, I know I'm gonna be covering a bunch of stuff and it's gonna be very generic and it's not gonna apply to maybe you, but it'll apply to someone else. So what I'm going to probably do a little bit after this video is posted is put time cues, time cards down below that'll give you times you can skip to in the video to get to where you are looking for, because not all of it's going to apply to you. So I'm not going to make you watch that, but I want to make sure you get the rest of the information that's going to be maybe at the end of the video that you might miss out on if you don't go to it. So those time cues are down below, but if you're one of those people that is just starting out, I recommend watching the whole entire video in totality because there might be some things that you didn't realize that you need to know about until you actually hear about them. We're going to go over everything from the actual application to proving income to having pets, your security deposit. It's definitely going to be an intro video to applying for leases because I know a lot of people need these videos because I don't always want to read some long giant article about it. I'd rather just hear someone talk about it. So we're gonna talk about it. Now, when most people think of applying for an apartment lease, they think of that physical application you get or a potential PDF online. And applying for leases is a lot more than that application, but I do want to cover them because obviously you're gonna have to fill one out. Now, a lot of this is gonna depend on whether you are applying for an apartment complex or you are applying to live in a house or from one person landlord instead of more of like a company. So if you're gonna do it more independently where it's an individual you are renting from, or you're renting from a few individuals and not per se a larger company like an apartment complex, it can change these numbers or these factors, but a lot of this information will spill over to that, but it's gonna be geared more towards apartment complexes. Now, apartment complexes are usually gonna make you fill out an application for every single person that is applying for the lease, and I've seen them range from about $25 when they're on sale to $100, in most cases about $50 to $100 per person. Again, per person, so it adds up. You want to make sure you're not applying for a bunch of different places. You want to narrow it down a little bit or this can get a little bit expensive. Now, when it comes to this application, it's going to ask a bunch of generic questions. Now, the income part can be a little bit more difficult because it's more than that physical paper, but before we talk about that, I do want to mention the fact that applications can range in time that they come back. Some buildings will literally run your application and can get an answer to you in a couple hours, sometimes within the day, and some companies take multiple days, and it's not per se based on the company, it's based on the software they use, how much information they run, how many places you've lived, if you're coming from another country. So unfortunately, the only person that can give you an estimate on how long it's going to take is that specific apartment building, and I would ask that question. Now, when they run the applications, they're usually going to run that application, a credit check, a background check, and prove that your income is real. Now, when it comes to that income, I do want to say before I go over the different ways to prove income is that you're going to be proving amongst every person that is living there. It's going to be a combined total. They're not going to be looking for that amount individually unless you are renting from an individual that wants you to prove crazy income. In most cases, if you have roommates, you're going to combine your income together to meet the requirements. Now, if you're just starting out, being able to prove income can be very hard. You might not even have a job yet. You might just have some savings. I'm not sure what situation you are in, but there are definitely different tricks and ways around it. Now, one of the easiest ways to prove income is to obviously just show pay stubs coming in from an employer, whether it's a bank statement showing a direct deposit or it's showing checks, and usually that apartment complex will be looking for the last 3 consecutive months. Sometimes it'll be a little bit more, or sometimes it'll be a little bit less, but they'll want to see a consistent amount of money coming in on a regular basis that meets a certain required amount. Now, in my experience, most apartment complexes are looking for about 2.5 times the rent to 3.5 times the rent. And obviously it varies depending on the location you are in and who you are renting from. I most commonly see from 2.5 to 3. I don't usually see above that unless you're talking about guarantors or co-signers, which we will go over that too. Just wait a moment. Now, I just want to say, sometimes I accidentally say percent instead of times, but when it comes to income, it's always going to be times. So let's say they're looking for 2 times the rent, and the rent is $1,000, they're gonna look for you to make $2,000 a month. And obviously it goes up as the prices go up and the percentage goes up. And then if you're not able to show 3 consecutive months of income, let's say you just got a job, then in most cases they will take an offer letter from your employer saying that you're going to be making that much money. Let's say you're moving to a new area, starting a new job. They're gonna say, you know, in a letter that this is how much this employee is going to make, and that landlord will either decide to call the employer or just take the offer letter as is and not bother checking up on it. But in most cases, when it comes to offer letters, a lot of people can easily fake those, so a lot of times landlords will call in and make sure that's how much the employee will actually be making. Now, let's say you don't make enough per month, you don't have an offer letter. What can you do? Well, one of the easiest ways is if you make that amount per year. So let's say you're an independent contractor, a freelancer, your income changes per month, yet overall in the whole entire year, you make enough money to prove income. So they'll also take that. A lot of buildings will ask for a tax return from the previous year, or if you haven't filed your taxes yet, sometimes they will take bank statements. But basically they want to know if they add up the amount you make every single month throughout the year, it'll average out to enough per month. Because for independent contractors, sometimes you're making a lot more per one month compared to another month. Now, let's just say you're basically dead broke and maybe you shouldn't be moving at all. I'm not gonna make that financial decision for you, but let's say you want to. Let's say you are about to move into your first apartment and go to college and your parents are gonna pay for things. And you don't have either one of those 3 options. There are 2 other ways you can get approved for a lease potentially. We're about halfway through the video, and I wanted to come on here to say that I really hope this video is helping you, but I need your help for a moment. I am working on my YouTube journey. I am very, very new at this. If you can't tell my subscriber count, it's not as high as I want it to be. I'm putting a lot of work into these weekly videos. I really think they are helping people, but I would really appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video with a friend. It really makes a difference, and it makes it so I can keep doing these videos for you every single week. I just love being able to provide information, provide things that I have learned from personal experience and help you guys out. So let's get right into the rest of the video after you hit the like button and the subscribe button. Come on, hit them. Doesn't take too long. It doesn't hurt you. It's free. Please. Okay, I'm done annoying you. Let's go back to the video. Is to have a guarantor or a co-signer. Now, these terms a lot of times are used interchangeably, and I've talked about it before in my other apartment hunting videos, what to expect in your first apartment. I've done a few of them. I'll link them down below. Now, since the terms are used so much interchangeably, and some people believe they're honestly the same thing and they're not, I do want to make sure that you ask your building which one they do, and ask specifically. Don't just say, do you allow a cosigner or do you allow a guarantor? Make sure they give you the details, because in most cases, a guarantor is a person that's going to be guaranteeing they can pay the rent if none of you do. And in that case, most buildings require them to have a very high amount of income. In some cases, 4 times the rent. And that is a lot of money that in most cases, a lot of people can't prove when you're talking about these high cost apartments with roommates. So the other thing that you could potentially do with a building is have a co-signer. And if it's a literal co-signer, in most cases, it will be a person that helps with that income requirement. So instead of it being one individual who has to make way more than you do, it's going to be a person that's going to help you make that income requirement. So in addition to your roommates, your mother, your father, your uncle, your aunt, whoever it is that's willing to co-sign for you is going to join in on the lease and basically say, I'm almost like a roommate, I can help make up any difference in income. And that's a lot easier to do than a guarantor who has to guarantee they can pay the whole totality of rent. But in the general sense of things, those are 2 other ways to make up the income requirement. You just have to figure out what your building allows that you're applying for. They might not allow either, but in most cases, they're gonna at least allow a guarantor. Now that we've gone over a few different ways to get approved for a lease, and hopefully one of them works for you, I wanna talk about pets. Because personally, pets are like family. If you don't have a pet, you can skip past this part. Again, time cards down below. But either way, if you do, you know their family, you know you want to bring them with you, you want to make sure it works for you and your potential future apartment. So the biggest thing is I'd recommend looking for pet-friendly buildings. And I don't mean pet-friendly in the sense of there's a dog park outside. I mean pet-friendly in the sense of they will allow you to have a pet. There are some ways around that, but ideally you just want to find a place that's already pet-friendly. In a lot of cases, they're going to require a pet deposit and pet rent. Potentially both, or maybe one or the other. Now I'm going to tell you some ways to potentially get around pet deposits and pet rent, but first I want to let you know that pet deposits can range so dramatically. I've seen ones from $50 to $500. And I paid that until I learned a trick, but point is, in addition to that deposit, a lot of times they'll charge monthly rent for your pet. Your pet's not going to be paying that rent, you're going to be paying that rent, and it can also range, but in most cases I've seen around $50 per month, which adds up. It really does over the course of a lease add up, and you don't want to be paying that in addition to paying for all your other expenses when it comes to having a pet. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. Unless you're in certain states like California. California is one of the states that allows you to have an emotional support animal. And if you have a registered emotional support animal, you do not have to pay pet rent or pet deposits. They are legally not allowed to charge you for that. And in some cases, buildings that aren't pet friendly have to accept that pet because they're an emotional support animal, not technically a pet. Unlike a service animal, they do not have to go through training. So an emotional support animal is literally as literal as it sounds. They are there for emotional support. There is a lot of services online where you pay a small fee, answer some questions, it will be sent over to a psychologist of sort. You're not really going to be talking to them in most cases. And they literally say online on a lot of these websites that you can get an emotional support animal for daily work stress. You don't have to be going through anything more intense. You could be, and definitely you'll be eligible to, but in most cases it can literally be just daily work stress, daily life stress that makes you eligible for an emotional support animal. And like I said, the best part of that is the fact that you do not have to pay pet rent or a pet deposit. And then in addition to that, they will send you a letter to send to your landlord to prove that you have an emotional support animal and they can't charge you for said fees. Now, this does not work in every state. You'll have to check because I don't know where you currently live, nor do you need to tell me. Though if you want to comment down the state, that'd be kind of cool. I would love to hear what state you guys live in. Just, no addresses. We don't need that. But point is, depending on what state you're in, can depend if emotional support animals are a thing or not. Some states do not have them at all. And in that case, you might have to pay pet rent. You might have to pay a pet deposit. But no matter what circumstance you're in, whether you have to pay it or you don't, I want to make sure so much, because I see this mistake so very often. Your pet has to be on your lease. I do not care what your landlord says to you. I don't care what your friend says to you. I don't care what your lover says to you. I don't care what anybody says to you. Your pet has to be on your lease. Because that is one of the easiest ways to get kicked out, is for you to say, "But you told me I could have a pet." And for your landlord to say, "It's not in the lease." Or, "I'm gonna magically charge you way more money because you didn't have it on the lease. You have a pet now, you have to pay this extra money." So don't get yourself in a bad scenario. Make sure you always have every single pet, and I mean every single pet. So if you have a bunch of pets, make sure they're all on there and they're all eligible to live there. Because technically, if it's not in writing, they're not eligible to live there. And it might sound silly, but this happens way more often than you think. Landlords, if they want you gone, if they want to all of a sudden bring in a new tenant and raise the rent, or they want to get more money from you, they will find a way. And it's very unfortunate, but it's true, so make sure you get anything and everything you need in writing. Now, as for those people that might have unique animals or breeds that are bad breeds, I don't personally believe in that at all. I'm very against discriminating against certain breeds of dogs, but there are still buildings that do it. And like I told you about the emotional support animal, if your state is eligible for emotional support animals, that is one of the easiest ways to get a breed that a building might not per se say yes to. So let's say you have one of the very common ones, which they're adorable, amazing creatures, and that is a pit bull. If you have a pit bull or another aggressive breed, then one of the easiest ways to get around your building saying no is to bring them as an emotional support animal. If your state does not have emotional support animals, there are still a few other loopholes. You'll just have to look more into them based on your state. Now, before you leave this video and before I close it out, I want to mention 3 things really quickly. First one's going to be security deposit. Security deposit is actually another way to potentially get approved for an apartment because they might say no to you, but if you pay a higher security deposit, they will say yes to you. Because basically, if you don't end up paying your rent, they'll just take your security deposit and kick you out. But either way, that security deposit can range in amounts so much. It can be first and last months. It can be so many variety of things. Some people even have move-in specials where they're like, security deposit's only $90. And so point is, it can range a lot. It can be the reason that gets you approved. I would definitely ask the building, ask what the range is for their typical security deposit, what it starts at, because some buildings, no matter what your check comes up with, like what your background check, security deposit, income, all those different things, they still have a base security deposit that can sometimes be very high, and you want to make sure you have that money saved up and you're able to do it before you even bother applying for the place. Because what's the point in getting approved for a place that you can't afford the security deposit for? So that is one thing to keep in mind. And then the other 2 things I do want to mention is some applications and applying for leases require you to have landlord references and or personal references. I have definitely worked for a building that required both of them. We didn't follow up with said information we got in most cases. So it can really vary depending on the building. Some buildings will call the past landlord references. Some of them will call the personal references. A lot of them will not. I'm gonna be honest there. A lot of them do not call and follow up, but some of them require you to have them anyway. Now, if you don't have them at all, it's not like that's gonna be a guaranteed no. Just explain your circumstance, explain that potentially it's your first ever place, you lived at home before, whatever it is, explain your scenario and just make sure the building is well aware of who you are, what scenario you are in, and just make them feel confident that you can pay your rent. And that can be done in many different ways. Now, if you have lived somewhere before and it wasn't a good scenario, you didn't pay rent, whatever the situation is, the reality is you probably don't want to give that information over, but if it was really that bad of a situation, it's probably gonna come back on your background check or your credit check. So in the end, it might leave you with a no, but hopefully if you're watching this video, you are new in the ventures and you're not in the scenario where you have bad past lease experience. And I hope overall this video helped you. If you want any more information, I will link down below my other apartment videos where we go over a lot of similar stuff like this. And I do post new videos every single Wednesday where I do videos on helping you figure out adulting. Well, I'm attempting to figure it out myself, and I love doing videos like this because I was a past leasing agent. I do have experience in this, and I hope you take my knowledge and use it. Go apply for that lease. Go get your dream first apartment until you get your dream apartment someday. And I hope you have a great rest of your morning, evening, night, whatever it is for you, crazy fam. I'll see you soon.